On a single day, millions of hidden pages were unlocked, thousands of videos, countless images. What they revealed was not just crime, but a system built on silence. Those who preach humanity, civilization, and rights were living behind polished smiles and shining stages, while something unspeakable happened in the shadows. There were whispers of private islands, closed doors, exclusive gatherings where power ruled and innocence disappeared. One voice once screamed on camera, "They are not human." After that, silence. Luxury on the outside, rot on the inside. This is not a story meant to comfort you. This is a reminder that the darkest truths often hide behind the brightest lights.
The Architect and the New Disclosures. The shadow of transparency. History is often written in ink, but the history of power is written in shadows. For decades, Jeffrey Epstein was synonymous with extreme wealth, private islands, and the highest echelons of global influence. But in January 2026, the veil was finally lifted. Following the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the U.S. Department of Justice released a staggering 3 million pages of previously unredacted documents. These are not just files, they are a digital blueprint of how a man with no inheritance and no visible product managed to purchase the silence of the powerful. Today, we begin our deep dive. We aren't looking for rumors, we are looking at the facts, the newly unredacted emails, the court-verified ledgers, and the geographic reality of a network that spanned from the classrooms of Manhattan to the offshore accounts of the Caribbean. Who was the architect, and how did he build a bridge into the souls of the elite? The Dalton Anomaly. To understand the monster, we must look at the math teacher. In the mid-1970s, Jeffrey Epstein was hired at the Dalton School, one of New York City's most prestigious private institutions. He had no college degree, a fact that in any other scenario would have disqualified him, yet he was there. According to the January 2026 DOJ disclosures, newly released internal memos from the school's archives show a pattern of strategic grooming. Epstein wasn't just teaching math, he was studying the parents. Dalton was the playground of the billionaire class. It was here that he met Donald Barr, the headmaster, and more importantly, the fathers of his students who occupied seats on Wall Street. The records show that Epstein utilized his position to gain proximity. He didn't just teach, he networked. He transformed himself from a Brooklyn-born tutor into a financial prodigy. By 1976, he had charmed his way into Bear Stearns, a massive global investment bank. Within 4 years, he became a limited partner. But the question remained, how does a teacher become a partner at a top-tier Wall Street firm in record time? The 2026 unredacted files suggest it wasn't just financial acumen, it was his ability to handle sensitive client matters, a euphemism for the private, often dark needs of the ultra-wealthy. The mystery of the wealth, the Wexner connection. Narrator. If Dalton was the spark, Leslie Wexner was the fuel. Wexner, the billionaire behind Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, became Epstein's primary and, for a long time, only client. Deep dive. For years, journalists wondered why a retail tycoon would give full power of attorney to a man like Epstein. The January 2026 release includes unredacted correspondence between Epstein's office and Wexner's financial managers. These emails reveal a sophisticated shielding operation. Epstein wasn't just managing money, he was managing access. He moved into the massive 9-story mansion on 9 East 71st Street in Manhattan, a property that belonged to Wexner. This geography is important. This house was the largest private residence in Manhattan. Its walls were lined with surveillance equipment and eccentric decor. This was the stage. The 2026 documents highlight a series of Project Alpha memos. These memos show how Epstein used Wexner's credit lines to establish a front of legitimacy. He created an aura of untouchable wealth that allowed him to approach scientists, politicians, and royals. He positioned himself as a scientific philanthropist, but the ledger tells a different story. The money wasn't moving into investments, it was moving into private logistics, planes, security, and a network of young women.
The grooming of high society, the 2026 email evidence. This brings us to the most chilling discovery of the recent disclosures. The 2026 DOJ files include thousands of unredacted emails from the late 90s and early 2000s. They show that Epstein didn't just invite people to dinner, he provided solutions. If a prominent scientist needed funding for a controversial project, Epstein was there. If a politician needed a private flight to avoid public scrutiny, the Lolita Express was fueled and ready. One specific email thread from March 2001 shows Epstein coordinating with several European socialites. The tone is transactional. He talks about introducing the new generation to his associates. This confirms what investigators long suspected. He was using the vulnerability of youth as a form of social currency to bind the elite to him. Once you accepted a favor from Epstein, you were part of the network. And in the world of the 1%, silence is the most expensive commodity. The geographical fortress, Manhattan to the islands. Geography played a vital role in Epstein's architecture of silence. In New York, he had the mansion. In New Mexico, the Zorro Ranch. In Paris, an apartment near the Arc de Triomphe. But his masterpiece was in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Why the Caribbean? Because in international waters and territories, jurisdiction is a labyrinth. The 2026 data dump contains GPS logs and manifestos from his private fleet. We see a pattern of dark flights, trips where the transponders were turned off as they approached the islands. Epstein built a fortress of solitude where the laws of the mainland didn't apply. He spent millions on local political donations in the Virgin Islands to ensure his hidden island remained hidden. The newly released files show that he essentially owned the local regulatory oversight, allowing him to build underground structures that weren't on any public map. Jeffrey Epstein didn't just happen, he was constructed. He was an architect who understood that the greatest weakness of the powerful is their desire for things that cannot be bought in public. By the early 2000s, his web was complete. He had the money, he had the house, and he had the files on everyone who visited him. But the question remains, what actually happened on that island? How did the Little St. James become a site of global infamy? Little St. James, the island of no return, the siren of the Caribbean. In the crystal-clear waters of the United States Virgin Islands lies a 70-acre piece of land that became the most infamous coordinate on the global map, Little St. James. To the passing sailor, it looked like a billionaire's paradise. But according to the January 2026 declassification, which released over 180,000 images and surveillance logs, this island was not a retreat. It was a sophisticated data-gathering fortress. For the first time, we are moving past the rumors of secret tunnels and looking at the actual FBI floor plans and forensic images. What was hidden beneath the limestone?
Why was there a temple that looked like a movie set? Today, we map the 3 million pages of evidence to reveal the geography of a nightmare. The logistics of isolation. Geography is the ultimate tool for those who wish to hide. Little St. James was strategically chosen. It is accessible only by sea or private helicopter. The 2026 DOJ files reveal that Epstein spent over $20 million on a global surveillance mesh for the island. Technical analysis. The released images show high-definition cameras hidden in artificial rocks and palm trees along the coastline. Every guest who stepped off the Lolita Express at the Cyril E. King Airport and was ferried to the island was recorded from multiple angles before they even reached the main house. The documents show that the island's internet was routed through a private satellite array, bypassing local Caribbean providers. This allowed Epstein to maintain a dark hub, a server room located in the basement of the main residence that mirrored data directly to his properties in New Mexico and New York. The 2026 release confirms that the island was effectively a panopticon, a place where everyone was watched but no one could see out. The temple and the hidden vaults. Perhaps the most analyzed structure on the island is the blue and white temple. For years, conspiracy theories ran wild. However, the 2026 forensic report provides the cold, hard facts. The images released in early 2026 show the interior of the temple. It wasn't a place of worship. It was an elaborate elevator housing. The temple sat atop a reinforced concrete shaft that descended 3 levels underground. Inside these hidden vaults, FBI investigators found a climate-controlled archive. This wasn't just a place for physical evidence, it was a digital library. According to the 3 million pages of evidence, this vault contained hard drives encrypted with military-grade software. These drives held the insurance policy, surveillance footage from the guest rooms. The geography of the island was designed so that every private moment of a high-profile guest became a permanent record in the vault, ensuring Epstein's lifelong protection through the threat of exposure. The 180,000 images, the visual evidence. Among the 180,000 images released in January 2026, several thousand focus on the service tunnels. These were not the mythical underwater labyrinths of internet lore, but a very real, very functional network of corridors that allowed staff and associates to move between the main house, the library, and the guest villas without being seen from the surface. The photos show a stark contrast. On the surface, luxury, infinity pools, and sun-drenched terraces. Beneath the surface, industrial-grade hallways, heavy steel doors, and rooms equipped with advanced recording equipment. The 2026 surveillance data also includes thermal imaging logs. These logs show that the island was active 24/7. Even when Epstein wasn't present, maintenance crews were constantly updating the security hardware. The unredacted files suggest that the island functioned as a black site for the global elite, a place where the traditional rules of American law were physically blocked by the geography of the sea and the technology of the vaults. The 2026 Registry of Entry. Narrator. The most significant part of the 3 million-page dump is the Island Registry. While the flight logs have been public for years, the entry logs from the island's private dock were only fully unredacted last month. These logs reveal that the network was far more extensive than previously thought. It wasn't just about the famous names we've heard. It included technical contractors, offshore bank representatives, and fixers from multiple continents. The 2026 documents provide a timeline of ghost arrivals, boats that arrived at 3 a.m. and departed before sunrise. The surveillance photos associated with these timestamps show crates of equipment and documents being moved into the vaults. This suggests that in the final months before his arrest in 2019, Epstein was using the island's geography to consolidate and hide evidence that we are only now seeing in 2026. Little St. James was not a home, it was a machine designed to strip people of their dignity while capturing the secrets of the powerful. The 180,000 images we have seen are a testament to how far one man went to build a fortress that he thought was impregnable. But as the ocean air began to corrode the steel of his vaults, so too did the truth begin to leak out. The island still stands, now a silent witness to the crimes analyzed in these 3 million pages. But who were the people who walked these halls?
The 2026 client list and the global elite. The transparency paradox. On January 30, 2026, the world witnessed one of the largest data declassifications in American history. Under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the Department of Justice released the final wave of documents, bringing the total to over 3.5 million pages. For years, the public had demanded a client list, a single, definitive directory of everyone involved. What the 2026 release revealed, however, was something far more complex. It wasn't a single list, but a sprawling digital paper trail of emails, flight manifests, and dinner invitations that spanned decades. Today, we analyze the names that have resurfaced in this latest tranche, not through the lens of rumor, but through the cold, hard evidence provided by the DOJ. We look at the documented relationships of the global elite and the social currency that fueled the Epstein network. The tech titans, new email disclosures. One of the most significant revelations in the January 2026 tranche involves the world of big tech. Analysis of Elon Musk. The newly unredacted emails from the January 30th release show a series of cordial exchanges between Jeffrey Epstein and Elon Musk. While Musk has historically denied a personal connection, the 2026 files contain 2 separate email threads where the two discussed potential visits to Epstein's island. It is important to note, the documents do not provide evidence of illegal activity by Musk. Instead, they show Epstein's relentless pursuit of high-profile innovators to bolster his image as a scientific patron. Analysis of Bill Gates. The latest documents include internal memos from Epstein's staff detailing multiple meetings at the Manhattan mansion. The 2026 release includes a 58-page manual for Epstein's Florida staff, which mentions specific protocols for high-value visitors like Gates. While Gates has expressed regret over these meetings, stating they were for philanthropic purposes, the sheer volume of correspondence released this year highlights just how deeply Epstein had integrated himself into the philanthropic circles of the ultra-wealthy. The political spectrum, presidents and power. No part of the Epstein files is more scrutinized than the names of political leaders. The 2026 release provides a deeper look into the documented interactions with former U.S. presidents. Bill Clinton. The January 2026 documents contain hundreds of pages referencing Bill Clinton, including flight logs and invitations. While Clinton has maintained he knew nothing of Epstein's crimes, the House investigation following this release has looked into the extent of the relationship. The files confirm numerous flights on Epstein's aircraft, but, crucially,
The DOJ memo from July 2025 and the 2026 final report state that no smoking gun of criminal participation by the former president was found in the government's possession. Donald Trump also addressed the files. The 2026 tranche includes various unverified tips submitted to the FBI, which the DOJ itself has labeled as unfounded or sensationalist claims from the 2020 election cycle. However, the files do document Trump's social proximity to Epstein in the 1990s and early 2000s. The 2026 DOJ report emphasizes that Trump pushed for maximum transparency in these releases, aiming to clarify his own lack of relationship with Epstein in the later years. These documents show that Epstein used political proximity as a shield. By having his name associated with leaders from both sides of the aisle, he created a zone of untouchability. The fall of the royal and the diplomat. Beyond the United States, the 2026 release had immediate international consequences. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the man formerly known as Prince Andrew, appears at least several hundred times in the January 30th files. The unredacted emails include an invitation for Epstein to dine at Buckingham Palace and photos that were previously withheld from the public. While Andrew has consistently denied his allegations against him, the 2026 documents show that he remained in contact with Epstein even after the financier's 2008 conviction, a fact that led to the permanent removal of his royal titles by King Charles III. The files also claimed the careers of European figures like Peter Mandelson and Miroslav Lajčák, who resigned following the disclosure of their extensive ties to the network. These aren't just names, they represent the diplomatic shield Epstein built. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a bridge between international governments, using his wealth to facilitate meetings that were never meant to be on the official record.
The client list myth versus reality. One of the most important takeaways from the 3.5 million pages is the DOJ's official stance on the client list. In a letter to Congress accompanying the January 30th, 2026 release, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stated that a formal, numbered client list intended for blackmail was not found in the FBI's seizure of Epstein's estate. Instead, investigators found a massive phone directory and a social ledger. While the public hoped for a list of clients, what we received was a list of associates. The 2026 files suggest that Epstein's power didn't come from a single ledger, but from the 3 million pages of emails and photos we are now seeing. He didn't need a list, he had the data. The tragedy revealed in 2026 is that many of these individuals may not have committed crimes, but their presence in his circle provided the legitimacy Epstein needed to continue his operations for decades. The 2026 release of the Epstein files has taught us that power is rarely a straight line. It is a web. The names we have discussed today, from tech billionaires to presidents, are part of a tapestry of influence that allowed a predator to hide in plain sight. As the world combs through these 3.5 million pages, one thing is clear. The silence that Epstein bought was expensive, but in 2026, it finally became unaffordable. But how did the law fail so spectacularly? Why did it take 20 years and a special act of Congress to see these files?
Institutional failure, banks, and the legal shield. To build an empire of shadows, you need more than just a private island. You need a financial engine that never shuts down. For 20 years, the world wondered how a convicted sex offender could move billions of dollars across international borders without a single alarm bell ringing. The answer arrived in late 2025 and early 2026.
as the Senate Finance Committee, led by Senator Ron Wyden, expanded its Follow the Money investigation. The reality of Wall Street's complicity was finally laid bare. Today, we look at the institutional failure, the banks that turned a blind eye, the legal non-prosecution agreement that broke the system, and the $1.5 billion in suspicious transactions that were ignored until it was too late. This is the story of how the shield was built. The J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank settlements. In the world of high finance, your reputation is your currency. But for J.P. Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank, their association with Jeffrey Epstein became a historic liability. By 2026, the dust has settled on two of the most significant settlements in banking history. J.P. Morgan paid $290 million, while Deutsche Bank paid $75 million to settle lawsuits brought by Epstein's victims. These weren't just fines, they were admissions of a broken system. The 2026 DOJ files and recent Senate memos reveal that J.P. Morgan processed over $1 billion in suspicious transactions for Epstein over 15 years. Internal reviews titled Project Jeep show that bank executives were warned as early as 2006. One compliance officer even urged a rapid response to exit the relationship in 2010, yet the bank stayed. Why? Because Epstein wasn't just a client, he was a client developer. He introduced bank executives to some of the wealthiest people on earth, from tech founders to global billionaires. To the banks, the red flags were overshadowed by the green of potential profits. The 2026 probe into Bank of America and BNY Mellon. As of January 30, 2026, the investigation has moved beyond the usual suspects. A federal judge in New York recently ruled that Bank of America must face claims that it obstructed the enforcement of trafficking laws. The new evidence? The 2026 disclosures highlight a shocking failure by Bank of New York Mellon. Senator Wyden's investigation uncovered that Epstein moved nearly $400 million through BNY accounts across 270 wire transfers. The bank waited years, sometimes over a decade, to flag these transactions with the Treasury Department. When compliance officers finally asked about millions of dollars being sent to recipients in Eastern Europe, the answers provided by Epstein's team were tuition or rent. In any other case, these would be immediate triggers for a sex trafficking investigation. But in the Epstein network, these far-fetched excuses were accepted without question. The 2026 Senate report calls this a pervasive culture of lawlessness, where high-value clients are treated as exceptions to the law.
The NPA, a legal shield like no other. While banks provided the money, the 2008 Non-Prosecution Agreement, NPA, provided the immunity. This document, signed in Florida, is perhaps the most controversial legal deal in American history. Deep analysis. The NPA didn't just protect Epstein, it granted immunity to any potential co-conspirators. The July 2025 DOJ memo provided a retrospective on this deal, admitting it was an extraordinary failure that violated the rights of the victims by not informing them of the plea deal. Newly released emails from 2026 show that Epstein's legal team, a dream team of the most powerful lawyers in America, spent 9 months grooming the language of this agreement. They weren't just fighting a court case, they were crafting a shield that would allow Epstein to continue his lifestyle for another 11 years. The geography of the law was manipulated. By pleading guilty to a state-level charge in Florida, he blocked federal prosecutors in other districts from touching him for a decade. The 2026 legislative reckoning. The failure of the banks and the legal system has led to a major legislative shift in 2026. Following the exposure of the 3 million pages, Congress is now debating the Wall Street Accountability Act,
which aims to remove the client-developer loophole that allowed banks to protect Epstein. Investigators have concluded that the red flags were not missed, they were overruled. High-ranking bank executives personally intervened to keep Epstein's accounts open even after he was a registered sex offender. The 2026 files show that the system didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because it was designed to protect those who bring in the most money. The legal shield was a collaboration between high finance and high-stakes law, creating a private justice system for the 1%. Jeffrey Epstein didn't just hide his money, he weaponized it. By making the world's largest banks his partners, he ensured that his downfall would be their downfall. But as we have seen in early 2026, even the strongest shields eventually crack. The $290 million settlements and the Senate's Follow the Money probe have shown us the price of silence. But one question remains. What was the final cost?
The final verdict: accountability in 2026. The silence of the paper trail. For decades, the Epstein network was a whispered myth, a ghost story told in the corridors of power. But as of February 2026, the ghost has a paper trail. Following the final release of over 3.5 million pages under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the world is no longer asking if the powerful were involved. We are now asking what the consequences will be. From the halls of Buckingham Palace to the federal prison camps of Texas, the fallout of 2026 has been swift and unforgiving. Today, in our final chapter, we look at the aftermath. We look at the figures who have lost their titles, the co-conspirator who remains behind bars, and the unanswered questions that even 3 million pages cannot fully resolve. This is the final verdict on a legacy of shadows. The fall of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Perhaps the most visible symbol of accountability in 2026 is the man formerly known as Prince Andrew. The 2026 reality. Following the January 30, 2026 document dump, the pressure on the British monarchy reached a breaking point. The files included never-before-seen photos of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in compromised positions, including images released just days ago showing him in a crouching posture over an unidentified woman. While the former prince continues to deny any wrongdoing, the political reality has shifted. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has officially called for Andrew to cooperate with U.S. authorities. Following his titles being stripped by King Charles III in late 2025, he now faces a potential subpoena from the U.S. House Oversight Committee for a transcribed interview. The geography of his life has shrunk from royal palaces to the royal estate at Sandringham. For the first time in history, a member of the British royal family has been effectively exiled from public life due to his documented proximity to a criminal network. The Ghislaine Maxwell and the Club Fed controversy. While Epstein is gone, his primary partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, remains the focal point of the legal aftermath. The current status. As of early 2026, Maxwell is serving her 20-year sentence at the Bryan Federal Prison Camp in Texas. Her transfer to this minimum security facility in late 2025 sparked national outrage, with critics labeling it a club-fed environment, where she resides alongside other high-profile inmates, like Elizabeth Holmes. However, the 2026 documents have made her appeal nearly impossible. The recent tranche of files included detailed interview notes from victims describing Maxwell as the vicious manipulator who was the true architect of the grooming process. Even as her legal team seeks a Supreme Court review, the 3.5 million pages of evidence act as a permanent anchor. For Maxwell, 2026 is not about freedom, it is about the final realization that the social currency she once traded is now worthless. The impact on American politics. The Epstein Files Transparency Act didn't just release documents, it ignited a political firestorm in Washington. The political fallout. The January 2026 release has led to a series of high-profile resignations. In Europe, officials like Miroslav Lajčák and Peter Mandelson have stepped down as their names appeared in unredacted emails. In the U.S., the House investigation has pivoted toward the handling of the records. There is now a bipartisan push to investigate why the Department of Justice originally redacted over 500 pages in the December rollout. Figures like Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have used the 2026 data to demand a total audit of the FBI's initial 2006 investigation. The files have become a weapon in the 2026 political landscape, used to challenge the untouchable status of donors and power brokers. The Transparency Act of 2026 has given us the names, the dates, and the geography of the crimes. But true accountability doesn't end with a document dump. It begins when we, the public, refuse to let power be an excuse for silence. The island may be empty, the mansions may be sold, and the architect may be gone, but the files are now ours, and in the light of day, the shadows have nowhere left to hide.